You already know what forcing feels like. That tightness in the chest when you are mid-session and the scene will not stay vivid. That quiet desperation when you catch yourself rehearsing the feeling over and over, pushing harder, as if more repetition will finally make it stick. If that is familiar, the problem is not your technique. The problem is what your subconscious is accurately reporting back to you. Forcing is not what happens when you try too hard. Forcing is what happens when your dominant state still registers the thing as absent. You can hold the scene with perfect clarity for a full hour, and if you walk back into your day carrying the identity of someone who does not yet have the thing, the session evaporates. Every time. What I want to show you in this video is the specific mechanism Neville identified that explains why this happens. Because once you understand what forcing is actually signaling, you will never evaluate your practice the same way again. Let me start with the diagnosis as Neville understood it, because most of what is taught about forcing fundamentally misses it. Forcing is not a technique error, it is a state error. If it were a technique error, you could fix it by adjusting your SATs procedure, breathing differently, relaxing your body more. Most of the advice online lives at that level. Adjust the technique, try harder to relax. That advice treats the symptom, it does not treat the cause. Neville's actual diagnosis is simpler and more uncomfortable. You are forcing because the assumption has not been made. You are still standing outside the door of the reality you want, and every practice session is an attempt to convince yourself the door is open. Here is the part most students of Neville skip entirely. The practice session is not the problem. The problem is the 23 hours that surround it. Think about what happens from the moment you wake until the moment you begin your evening practice. Your subconscious is not neutral during those hours. It is reinforcing whatever state it has on record as your baseline. If that baseline says the desire has not arrived yet, then every ordinary hour confirms it. Your phone checks, your conversations, the first thought when you wake, all of it feeds the subconscious the same signal. Still waiting, still without, still reaching. Then you sit down for your session and try to override that accumulated signal in 1 hour of deliberate imagining. The forcing is the math working against you. And there is no technique adjustment that solves a state maintenance problem. And here is what you probably need to hear before I explain the correction. There is a specific signal that tells you whether your assumption has genuinely taken root. The signal is not whether the scene was vivid, it is not whether you felt emotional intensity. The signal arrives in how the minutes after the session feel. I will come back to that signal shortly, because it changes how you evaluate your practice entirely. There is a pattern I have watched repeat with student after student who is deep into Neville's work. They arrive with genuine understanding. They know the theory. They sit down, close their eyes, begin to construct the scene. At first it flows, the scene is vivid, the feeling comes. But then the mind catches itself. It registers the gap between the imagined scene and the actual room around them. Something tightens. They start to push the feeling to intensify, loop the sensory detail, trying to lock it. The session ends with exhaustion rather than ease. They wake the next morning, and within 40 minutes, the old familiar sense of it hasn't happened yet has returned, complete and undisturbed, as if the session never occurred. The cycle repeats for months. The technique is flawless, the results are inconsistent. The frustration compounds because they cannot locate the error. The error is not in the session, it is in what the session is trying to do. It is trying to be a complete solution to a continuous problem. This is the part of Neville's work that gets quietly omitted in almost every modern summary. It is not that teachers lie about the technique, it is that they stop the teaching at the session and leave the rest of the day unaddressed. The session is 1 hour, the day is 24. The unaddressed hours outvote the session every time. Now, here is where every major LOA influencer gets Neville wrong. Not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong. They hear the feeling of the wish fulfilled and tell you to generate intense positive emotions, peak states, joy, gratitude at high volume. That interpretation contradicts what Neville actually wrote. In his 1944 teachings, Neville said, Feeling is the secret. The feeling he meant is not excitement. It is the specific quality of a thing already possessed. The way a person who genuinely has a loving relationship does not feel intense excitement about it every waking moment. They feel the settled, natural ease of it. It lives in the background. It is assumed, not performed. Desire has urgency, assumption has ease. When you force, you are in desire, regardless of what the mental scene shows. Neville told a story from his own life that illustrates exactly what assumed ease looks like. In 1943, he found himself drafted into the US Army at age 38, stationed at Camp Polk in Louisiana. He wanted an honorable discharge to return to his New York apartment and continue his teaching. He did not construct elaborate mental movies, he did not visualize paperwork or try to influence any officer. Each night in the barracks, he would lie down as he approached sleep and simply feel the physical sensations of his own familiar bed in his New York apartment. The felt sense of lying in his own bed, surrounded by his own things, in a place that was simply his. After approximately 9 days, the Army granted him an honorable discharge under a specific military regulation. He had not arranged it. He had assumed a state, and the state arranged its own passage into the world. Notice what is absent: forcing, emotional intensity, desperate loops, only the natural settled sense of a place already inhabited. Nothing here requires unusual talent. Nothing here is reserved for people with a particularly elevated spiritual capacity. What it requires is attention to the quality of your felt state across the hours you have been treating as outside the practice. The mechanism is available to anyone willing to pay attention to their ordinary hours. Now, here is the counterintuitive piece that practitioners who studied Neville's actual recordings understand, and it is a detail dropped from almost every modern course. It is about what your consciousness does in the window immediately after your session ends. That window determines whether what you build compounds or dissolves. I will show you what to do in that window in the protocol below. Here is a concrete three-step approach for tonight. First, in the last 2 minutes of your session, instead of reviewing the scene one more time, rest in the feeling without the image. Drop the mental movie. Sit in the felt quality of the assumed state. No scene, no story, just the sensation of the thing being true. If ease arrives, even briefly, that is the signal the assumption is landing. That is the signal I mentioned earlier. Second, the moment the session ends, treat the next 15 minutes as a continuation of the practice, not a break from it. Do whatever you are doing, make tea, check a message, but stay in the felt quality of the assumed state. This is the bridge moment where most people lose everything they built. It is the most important 15 minutes of your practice. Third, identify one specific recurring moment in your day tomorrow when the old state reasserts itself. A particular trigger, a particular time, a particular type of thought. Make a note of that moment tonight. Tomorrow, when you arrive at that moment, notice the state without immediately trying to change it. Just locate it accurately. That honest location is the beginning of real state work. The reason your sessions have been followed by forcing is not that the technique is insufficient. The practice session can only compound if the hours that follow are not actively dismantling it. The forcing is your subconscious giving you an accurate report about your state, not a failure, a map. Seeing that is the easy half. The harder half is the work between sessions, the ordinary hours, the automatic states, the moments when nothing special is happening and your subconscious is simply running whatever it was trained to run. You can name the problem now, but naming it and closing it are different things. Installing a state that holds without effort across the full texture of your day requires a map of the hours, not the technique. Which moments in your specific day are where the old state reasserts itself most powerfully? That map is different for every person, and a single video cannot produce it. If you want what you have been practicing to finally have somewhere stable to land, the tool I would point you to is the source code diagnostic. It is a structured set of questions that helps you locate exactly where in your daily hours the assumed state breaks down, specific to your day. It is free. The link is in the description below. Tonight, before you begin your practice, take 2 minutes to notice where your attention has actually been living today. That honest inventory is more valuable than any technique adjustment you could make. In his teachings during the 1950s, Neville said, man's chief delusion is his conviction that there are causes other than his own state of consciousness. The forcing is not a failure, it is a map. Learn to read it.